Movie star Rock Hudson died at his Coldwater Canyon home this morning. His publicist says that the movie star's body has already been cremated.
At 59, Rock Hudson revealed he was dying of AIDS. The world gasped. This man, the towering matinee idol who had defined rugged masculinity for decades, was suddenly stripped bare before the cameras. The revelation shattered Hollywood's carefully constructed lies. His fans mourned, but many whispered about the truth they suspected all along. Behind the studio's polished image had been a man forced into a sham marriage, a man whose deepest love had been hidden from the public eye. Rock Hudson's confession was not only about illness, it was about decades of silence, of hiding, of compromise. To understand how he reached this tragic moment, we must return to the beginning, long before Hollywood claimed him. Rock Hudson was born Roy Harold Scherer Jr. in Winnetka, Illinois, in 1925. His father, a mechanic, lost steady work during the Depression. His mother struggled to provide stability. By the time Roy was still a boy, the marriage collapsed, and his father left. His mother remarried, giving him the surname Fitzgerald from his stepfather. The house was strict, sometimes cold, and the boy learned early to retreat into imagination. He loved the movies. At the local theater, newsreels flickered with battles abroad, and glamorous faces shone on the silver screen. Gable, Cooper, and Flynn seemed like gods, untouchable in their confidence. The young Roy studied them with fascination. He wanted to be like them, even as he carried the ache of feeling different inside. The 1,930 seconds and 1,940 seconds in America were not kind to boys who did not fit the mold. Masculinity was rigid. Men were expected to fight wars, marry women, and provide for families. Rumors of anything else could mean humiliation, even ruin. But Roy also grew tall, broad-shouldered, and handsome. By high school, people noticed. He had a gift for charm, though shyness sometimes clouded it. He sang in the Glee Club, acted in small plays, and dreamed of a larger life. World War II arrived when he was still a teenager. Like many young men of his generation, he joined the Navy. He served quietly, not in the grand battles but in the long, routine work that kept the war machine turning. In uniform, he looked the part of the all-American sailor. Yet even then, he carried a private longing he dared not name. When the war ended, Roy came home restless. Factories and offices held no allure. The movies still called to him. Los Angeles was booming, its sunshine promising opportunity for anyone bold enough to reach. He borrowed a car, drove west, and stared at the palm trees with awe. This was where dreams were made. But Hollywood, in the late 1,940 seconds, was a fortress. Studios owned everything, from actors' contracts to the gossip columns. Secrets were buried deep, and outsiders rarely gained entry. Roy Fitzgerald, the boy from Illinois, was determined to climb those guarded gates. He had height, a square jaw, and a willingness to transform himself. Soon, he would meet the men who could make him a star, but at a cost that would define the rest of his life. Los Angeles in the late 1,940 seconds was a glittering trap. The studios owned actors, molding them like clay. To Roy Fitzgerald, it looked like a kingdom he wanted to enter. He worked odd jobs while chasing auditions. His looks caught the attention of Henry Wilson, a notorious talent agent who specialized in sculpting handsome men into stars. Wilson gave Roy a new name: Rock Hudson. Solid, simple, American. A name built to last on billboards. But the transformation was not immediate. Rock's early screen tests were clumsy. He needed dozens of takes to get through a single line, yet the camera loved his face. Wilson knew audiences would forgive awkwardness if they believed the image. Rock studied tirelessly, working with voice coaches, refining his walk, his posture, his smile. In 1948, Rock landed his first small role. It was only a fleeting moment in Fighter Squadron, but it marked his entrance. Over the next few years, Universal Pictures promoted him steadily. He was paired with actresses in publicity shots, sent to rodeos and parades, dressed in rugged clothes to look like the embodiment of American manhood. The studio planted stories in fan magazines, painting him as bashful, wholesome, and always on the edge of a new romance with a pretty starlet. By the mid-1950s, Rock Hudson was no longer a hopeful newcomer. He was a leading man. His role in Magnificent Obsession in 1954 drew praise and sympathy, and audiences embraced him. The next year, he starred opposite Jane Wyman in All That Heaven Allows, a lush melodrama that sealed his image as the sensitive but virile lover. His star only rose higher with Giant in 1956, where he stood alongside Elizabeth Taylor and James Dean. The performance earned him an Academy Award nomination and confirmed his place among Hollywood's elite. Fans swooned over his broad shoulders and gentle eyes. He became the kind of actor mothers trusted and daughters dreamed about. But with each step upward, the walls around him grew tighter. Reporters asked about his love life. Studio executives whispered about gossip they feared could surface. Rock played along, attending premieres with women chosen by the publicity department, smiling for photographs that hinted at romances that did not exist. Behind the glamour, he began to feel the strain of living two lives. He had built his career on charm and strength, but he knew a single slip could unravel it all. The higher he climbed, the greater the danger if secrets were revealed. Behind the locked gates of Hollywood mansions, another world existed. Rock Hudson, now a star, moved carefully within it. There were private parties where music played softly, curtains drawn tight, and men laughed without fear of reporters. It was here that Rock could breathe. Biographers recall his first serious relationships taking shape in the early 1950s. One partner, a quiet young man from the film industry, traveled with him discreetly. They shared hotel rooms under the guise of assistant and star. In Europe, away from the sharp eyes of American tabloids, they could walk side by side along narrow streets. But in Los Angeles, they had to return to coded signals and staged appearances with women. Henry Wilson, the agent who made him a star, enforced the charade. Wilson arranged dates with actresses, photo shoots that suggested passion, and stories planted in fan magazines. Rock was even pushed into marriage. In 1955, he wed Phyllis Gates, Wilson's own secretary. The wedding was splashed across newspapers as proof of his wholesomeness. Yet behind the photographs, the marriage was strained from the start. Some accounts suggest Phyllis hoped it was real, while others say she knew it was a cover. It lasted only 3 years, dissolving quietly, but the studio kept the scandal at bay. Despite the pressures, Rock sought connection. He found it in fleeting romances, and sometimes in steady partnerships. Friends recall him hosting gatherings at his Hollywood Hills home, where laughter echoed late into the night. He loved barbecues, music, and the comfort of people who accepted him. In these private circles, he was not the matinee idol. He was simply Roy again, tender and affectionate. Yet danger was always near. Confidential magazine, infamous for outing stars, circled him for years. Whispers spread in industry corridors. A slip could mean disaster. Lost contracts, ruined box office draw, humiliation in a culture that demanded its male icons appear untouchably straight. Rock walked the line with care, knowing the studios held morality clauses over his head. He lived for stolen moments. A hand squeezed in a darkened theater. A smile across a room filled with music. These glimpses of authenticity kept him going, even as the weight of secrecy grew heavier with each passing year. But secrecy had a cost. Every rumor that surfaced threatened not only his career, but also his sense of self. By the late 1950s, the tension between his private life and public image would explode into crisis. By the end of the 1950s, Rock Hudson's career stood at its peak. He was the leading man America adored. Yet danger crept closer with every headline. Gossip magazines thrived on scandal, and Rock's carefully arranged public romances seemed too perfect. Whispers began that something was being hidden, and Confidential magazine, notorious for destroying careers, nearly exposed him. Editors claimed to have information about his private life. Universal Pictures moved quickly. Lawyers, executives, and Henry Wilson fought to bury the story. To keep Rock safe, the studio tightened its grip. More photo spreads with women appeared. More fabricated romances filled fan magazines, but the pressure only grew heavier. His short marriage to Phyllis Gates had collapsed by 1958. To the public, it was explained away as incompatibility. Privately, it deepened his loneliness. Friends said he longed for a steady partner but feared the risk. Trust was rare. One wrong word, one betrayed secret, could destroy everything he had built. In the 1,960 seconds, Rock shifted toward romantic comedies. Films with Doris Day turned him into a symbol of light-hearted masculinity. Audiences laughed at his charm, never realizing the irony of his roles as the perfect bachelor resisting marriage. For Rock, the jokes cut close. He knew the truth behind the smile. The cracks began to show. By the 1,970 seconds, the studio system that once shielded him had dissolved. Without its protection, he was more exposed. Roles grew scarce. Younger actors replaced him. The whispers, once contained, spread with greater freedom in a culture slowly changing its attitude toward sexuality. He drank more, worked less, and avoided reporters prying questions. The personal cost was immense. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a man loved by millions but unknown to himself. Friends remembered him as gracious but sometimes distant, as if always protecting a piece of himself. The crisis of identity weighed on him, and isolation followed. The same man who once seemed invincible on screen now faced the terrifying possibility of being unmasked. And soon, a darker challenge arrived that no studio could hide. By the late 1,970 seconds, Rock Hudson was no longer the guaranteed box office draw he had once been. Yet he remained a familiar face, respected for his long career. He appeared in television movies, miniseries, and occasional features. His role in the hit series Dynasty in the 1,980 seconds brought him back into the public eye. On screen, he still carried the same poise, but his health was beginning to falter. Privately, Rock had built a chosen family of close friends. He often retreated to his Beverly Hills home, a place of quiet gatherings, laughter, and music. Away from the spotlight, he could share his life more openly with those who understood him. But the fear of exposure never vanished. Even as society began to shift in the late 1,970 seconds, acceptance was far from secure. Then came the illness. In 1984, doctors told him he had AIDS. At the time, the disease was barely understood, and panic spread across America. Newspapers called it the gay plague. Fear and stigma were relentless. For Rock, the diagnosis was devastating. He tried to keep it private, continuing to work, but the truth grew harder to hide. In July 1985, the secret ended. He publicly confirmed he had AIDS. The revelation shocked the world. For many, it was the first time they had heard the disease spoken by someone they admired. Suddenly, the man who had once symbolized traditional masculinity became the most famous face of a crisis, long ignored. His announcement brought compassion from fans but also revealed society's prejudice. Some colleagues avoided him. Others embraced him with fierce loyalty, including Doris Day, who stood by him in his final appearances. He became a symbol not of scandal, but of courage. In choosing honesty, even at the end, Rock gave a human face to a tragedy that was devastating countless lives. His final months were spent quietly in France and California, surrounded by friends. Weakened but still graceful, he carried himself with dignity. Reporters gathered at hospital doors, but inside, Rock found moments of peace, reflecting on a life lived in shadows and in light. Rock Hudson died on October 2nd, 1,985. He was 59 years old. The world mourned a Hollywood giant, but his legacy stretched beyond the screen. His final revelation forced a nation to confront both the AIDS epidemic and the cruelty of decades of silence. For years, he had embodied the fantasy of perfect masculinity. Yet behind the posters and press releases lived a man who longed for authenticity. His story reminds us of the cost of fame, of the price of hiding love in a world that demanded lies. He carried that burden with quiet strength until he could no longer remain silent. Today, Rock Hudson is remembered not just as a star, but as a human being who helped change how America saw illness, sexuality, and truth. His courage came late, but it mattered deeply. His life stands as a caution and an inspiration. What do you think about Rock Hudson's journey? Should Hollywood have done more to protect its stars, not just their images? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more untold stories of Hollywood's hidden past, remember to subscribe.